Okay, so I'm sorry for the interruption. All right, so I think we got to this slide. So the hypothalamic hormones and their pituitary target. Okay, so over here we have the hormones produced by the hypothalamus. We have the thyrotropin releasing hormone. We have the corticotropin releasing hormone. We have the gonadotropin releasing hormone. We have growth hormone releasing hormone. We have the growth hormone inhibiting hormone. We have the prolactin inhibiting hormone, dopamine. We have the melanocytes stimulate. So all these 7 hormones, they go straight to the anterior pituitary. Now, the only hormone produced by the hypothalamus that are sent to the posterior pituitary is ADH and oxytocin. ADH and oxytocin. Is that okay? Great. So mention some of the cells in the anterior pituitary. Mention the cells in the anterior pituitary. Yes, mention the cells in the anterior pituitary.
The corticotrophs.
The corticotrophs cells, the thyrotrophs cells. Which other cell? The gonadotroph cells. Yes, any other cell? The somatotrophs. The somatotrophs. Any other cell?
And then lactotrophs.
The lactotrophs. Any other cell? The melanotrophs. Okay, the melanotrophs. The melanotrophs. Okay, so the question I can ask you, if hypothalamus produces thyrotropin, which cell in the anterior pituitary does it target? What will be your answer?
The thyrotrophs.
The thyrotroph cells. Okay, another way I can ask this same question is that if the hypothalamus produces the thyrotropin releasing hormone, which part of the pituitary gland does it go?
The thyrotrophs.
No, you see, this time you had it wrong. You didn't pay attention to the question. I said, which part of the pituitary gland does it go?
The anterior pituitary.
The anterior pituitary. You see, anatomy can sometimes be very simple. Pay attention. Okay? Because the pituitary gland is in 2 parts. Okay? If I want you to talk about the cell, I'll be straight. I'll ask you that if the hypothalamus produces the thyrotropin releasing hormone, which cell in the anterior pituitary does it target? Then you now say thyrotrophs. But if I ask you a question that when the hypothalamus produces the TRH, which part of the pituitary does it go to? Anterior pituitary. Okay. All right. The next question. If hypothalamus produces gonadotropin releasing hormone, which cell in the anterior pituitary does it target?
The gonadotrophs.
The gonadotroph cells. Okay. If hypothalamus produces corticotropin releasing hormone, which cell in the pituitary gland does it target?
The corticotrophs.
This one is also corticotroph cells. This is correct. Okay. All right. If hypothalamus produces prolactin inhibiting hormone, which cell in the pituitary gland does it target?
The lactotrophs.
The lactotroph cells. So once you hear cells, straight away you should know we are talking about the troughs. So the thyroid, either thyrotroph, corticotrophs, simple as that. But if I ask you a question like, okay, if hypothalamus produces prolactin inhibiting hormone, which parts of the pituitary gland does it target?
The anterior pituitary.
Then this one, you go in for anterior pituitary. Is that okay? So all the time, pay attention to how the question will be structured. Okay. All right. So if we ask you, okay, if the hypothalamus produces oxytocin, which part of the pituitary gland does it target?
Posterior.
Posterior pituitary. So this one goes to the posterior pituitary. That's where it is going to. They are being sent. They are not being released, but still the target is the posterior pituitary. Okay. If hypothalamus produces ADH, which part of the pituitary does it target?
The posterior.
Yeah.
The posterior pituitary. Is that okay? So I can ask you a simple question like, okay, if hypothalamus produces oxytocin, if hypothalamus produces oxytocin, which of the following cells or which of the following areas of the pituitary gland does it target? Then I'll bring A, somatotrophs, B, corticotrophs, C, thyrotrophs, D, none of the above. What will be your answer?
None of the above.
The answer is none of the above. Is that okay? None of the above.
Yeah.
So if hypothalamus produces oxytocin, it doesn't target any cell in the anterior pituitary. The answer we would have been expecting is the posterior pituitary. So if you are seeing cells in anterior pituitary, then the answer you go in for is none of the above. Is that okay? Very simple questions like that. Okay, so I think we did a lot of even demonstrations on some of these things. Okay, good. And then we came down to pituitary gland. Okay, the pituitary gland, we learned that another name for pituitary gland is called what? The hypophysis gland.
Hypophysis.
Okay. Now, which endocrine organ is also called the master gland? What will be your answer?
The pituitary gland.
Pituitary gland. Is that okay? The pituitary gland. Which of the endocrine organs is called the master regulator?
And the
The
hypothalamus.
hypothalamus.
Come again.
Hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus. Is that okay? Now, a question that I can ask you over here is about the diameter of the pituitary gland. You remember I told you that all the sizes that I've highlighted in my slide, write all of them down. Like get a sheet and write all of them down. They will come the same way. How you see how the eye was? I brought some organs. You were writing the sizes. Those are anatomy things. Those are the things we are interested in as simple as they are. Those are the things we want in anatomy. Is that so? Something like this: the size, the diameter of the pituitary gland. Learn it, write it, learn how to write it. Right? Diameter of the pituitary gland. If we ask you what's the diameter of the pituitary gland, then you write. Is that okay? In an exam, what I can do is that I can provide you with the diameters and also provide you with the organs. Then you will write the organ and write the diameter you think. That's what I can do in exams. So I will give you all the sizes. So for example, if it's the kidney and the size, you see all the sizes line up in a box. Then the organs will also be lined up in a box. Then you will look at the organ, then you choose the size and write it against it. Is that okay? All right, that is fine. Now, which part of the pituitary gland hangs it from the hypothalamus? Which part of the pituitary gland hangs it from the hypothalamus? Yes, this portion. What's the name given to this portion of the pituitary gland? The portion that hangs it from the hypothalamus.
Infundibulum.
The infundibulum. Infundibulum. Is that okay? The infundibulum. Is that okay? What's the name given to the medial body of the anterior pituitary? The medial body of the anterior pituitary. The medial body of the anterior pituitary. What's the name?
The fundibular stalk.
No, the medial body of the anterior pituitary.
Oh, the
Pars intermedia.
The pars intermedia. Okay, what's the name given to the lower part or the lower portion of the anterior pituitary?
Pars
dentalis.
Okay, what's the name given to the topmost portion of the anterior pituitary?
Pars
tubillaris. Pars tubillaris. Okay, what's the name given to the body of the posterior pituitary? That's the pars nervosa. Is that pars nervosa? Okay, and I told you that the region of demarcation, this region, we call it infundibular stalk. The region of demarcation that is sort of separating it from the anterior pituitary, this region, infundibular stalk. Is that okay? That region is what we call the infundibular stalk. Okay, so an anatomical question that we can ask you from here is that which portion of the pituitary gland hangs it from the hypothalamus? The answer is the infundibulum. That one you have to know. Which portion of the pituitary gland hangs it from the hypothalamus? The answer is what? Infundibulum. Is that okay? The answer is infundibulum. Okay, another thing area that they usually examine students here is that they can ask you a question that one of the following are all parts of the anterior pituitary, except then you see pars tubularis, pars intermedia, pars distalis, then D, pars nervosa. What will be your answer?
Pars nervosa.
Pars nervosa. Why? Because pars nervosa is part of the pars nervosa is seen only at the level of the pars nervosa is seen only at the level of the posterior pituitary. Is that okay? Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. So now, so know the hormones produced by the hypothalamus and know the hormones produced by the pituitary gland. So now, what are some of the hormones produced by the pituitary gland? What are some of the hormones produced by the pituitary gland?
Growth hormone.
Growth hormone. Adrenocorticotropic hormones. So these are the hormones produced by the hypothalamus. So say follicle stimulating hormone.
Follicle stimulating hormone.
Luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone.
Luteinizing hormone.
Let me see who will get it. Which cell in the pituitary produce the follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormone? Which of the cells? Which of the cells in the pituitary gland produce the FSH and LH?
The gonadotroph.
Gonadotroph cells. Then we have the which of the cells in the pituitary produce the thyroid stimulating hormone?
Thyrotrophs.
The thyrotrophs. The thyrotrophs.
Okay, so it's very simple. You see, if you remember the cells, you know the hormones, you also remember the hormones they produce. Okay, so if we ask you to list the cells produced by the pituitary gland, just remember the cells in the anterior pituitary. Once you remember that, the anterior pituitary, we have the lactotroph cells, then it will help you to remember that, lactotroph cells, then we are looking at the prolactin releasing hormone. Is that okay? Once you remember the corticotroph cells, then you know, the corticotroph cells produces the adrenocorticotropic hormones. Once you remember the LH, then you know that, the gonadotroph cells produces the luteinizing hormone. Again, the gonadotroph cells also produces the follicle stimulating hormone. Is that okay? So all the time, try and remember. Yes, please.
Sir, please, the adrenocorticotropic, is it adreno or adeno?
Adrenal, from the word adrenal gland. Adrenal.
Okay.
Yes, so adrenocorticotropic hormones.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine. Okay, all right. So, and then I think I also demonstrated the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and I think one of you even demonstrated it. Some of you try to even replicate the demonstration in class. Yes, in a very perfect way. All right, so enough of the pituitary gland. And we started with the thyroid gland. Okay, we started with the thyroid gland. Okay, now we discussed that the thyroid gland is the largest endocrine gland. The largest endocrine gland. Is that so? If we ask you which of the endocrine glands are largest in terms of its size, that's the thyroid gland. There's the largest endocrine thyroid gland. It weighs about 20 to 25 grams. Now, because it's the largest, it means that you should pay attention to the size, because it's an organ that, because we are saying it's the largest, it means it's very likely we are interested in you knowing the size because it's the largest. Okay, so we are very interested in you knowing the size of the thyroid gland. Is that okay? Yeah. So it weighs 20 to 25 grams and it's highly vascularized. Is that okay? Highly vascularized. What does that mean? It means we have a lot of blood vessels around the thyroid gland. Okay. Where is the thyroid gland located? It's located anterior to the trachea, just below the larynx, and it spans between the level of C5 and then T1, meaning the fifth cervical vertebrae and then the first thoracic vertebrae. Okay, now this one too is very important. The location of the thyroid gland. Please pay attention to it very well. It's either, if we are asking you the location of the thyroid gland, it's two things. Either you say the thyroid gland is located anterior to the trachea, is correct. Or you are going to say the thyroid gland spans between the level of the fifth cervical vertebrae and then the first thoracic vertebrae. So if I ask you, what's the location of the thyroid gland? Simple. The thyroid gland is located anterior to the trachea. Is correct. Or the thyroid gland spans between the level of the fifth cervical vertebrae and the first thoracic vertebrae. That is also correct. Is that okay? Again, this gland also has another nickname. We call it the gland of metabolism. That's also, so if we ask you which gland is referred to as the gland of metabolism, is the thyroid gland. That's another name for the thyroid gland, the gland of metabolism. Okay, the gland of metabolism. And the thyroid gland looks like butterfly. It's butterfly in terms of its shape. Okay. And how many lobes does it have? So look at, you see, it looks like a butterfly. Okay, how many lobes do you see? 2 lobes. Okay, it has 2 lobes. The right lobe over here, and then the left lobe. And we can ask you that also. It's something you have to know. How many lobes do we have in the thyroid gland? Simple, 2 lobes. Is that okay? So how many lobes do we have in the thyroid gland? It's simple, 2 lobes. Which gland is also referred to as the gland of metabolism? The thyroid gland. Is that okay? So the thyroid gland has 2 lobes. Where is the thyroid gland located? Yes, where is it located?
Between C5 and T1.
Good. It's located in between the fifth cervical vertebrae and then the first thoracic vertebrae. Or you can also say it's located anterior to the trachea. Is that okay? Below the larynx. That is also correct. Is that so? Over here, pay attention to this. Pay attention to the fact that the thyroid gland is the largest gland. So if I give you about 4 glands and I ask you to choose the largest, and you see thyroid gland there, that's the largest. Simple as that. If I ask you which gland is also called the gland of metabolism, that's the thyroid gland. If we ask you where is the thyroid gland located, be expecting 2 things. Either you want to look at anterior to the trachea, or you are looking at a gland in between the fifth cervical vertebrae and then the first thoracic vertebrae. Okay. Now, how many types of cells do we have in the thyroid gland? How many types of cells do we have?
We have
5.
Okay.
2.
Okay. 2 types of cells. What are they?
Follicular cells.
Follicular cells.
Follicular cells. And then which other cell?
Parafollicular.
Good. So follicular cells
Parafollicular cells.
and then the parafollicular cells. Now the follicular cells, we also call them the epithelial cells. We also call the follicular cells epithelial cells. So if we ask you a question that, okay, which of the cells in the thyroid gland secretes, okay, T3 and T4, then the answer, you see epithelial cells there. Don't say the answer is not in. Don't call anybody and say answer is not in. Another name for the follicular cells is the epithelial cells. So if you don't see the follicular cells there, it's the same as the epithelial cells. Is that okay? And then the parafollicular cells, we also call them the C cells. The C cells. Okay, so we have two different types of cells in the thyroid gland. We have the parafollicular cells. They produce the T3 and T4. Okay. And then we have the parafollicular cells. They produce the calcitonin. And then we have the follicular cells. They produce the T3 and then the T4. Okay, so if I ask you, okay, which cell in the thyroid gland produces T3 and T4? What will be your answer? Which cell in the thyroid gland produces the T3 and T4? What will be your answer?
The follicular cell.
Epithelial
The
cells.
follicular cells. The follicular cells. Is that okay? Which cell in the thyroid gland produces calcitonin? What will be your answer?
The parafollicular.
All T cells. Please remember, because in exams, I can choose to use the T cells. So I can say, okay, one of the following cells in the thyroid gland produces calcitonin. Then you will see parafollicular cells there. I will use the T cells. So you have to know the names as well. Okay, I can also ask you, okay, the following cells in the thyroid gland produce T3 and T4. Then I would use the epithelial cells. I only use the word follicular cells. If you see the epithelial cells, the same. It's also correct. So we have different types of cells in the thyroid gland. The follicular cells, which we also call epithelial cells, and the parafollicular cells, which we also call the C cells. Is that all? Good. So look at this. So we have the follicular cells. They produce the. Yes, please.
Speaking.
Yes.
The line is
Please, the
breaking.
network is very poor.
Oh, but I think it should be fine now, right?
Okay, yeah, I think it's stable.
That's fine. Great. Yes. So we have the T3, and remember, the T3 is what we call the triiodothyronine. The T3 is what we call the triiodothyronine. And then the T4 is also called the tyrosine. The T4 is called the tyrosine. T3 is what we call the triiodothyronine. Okay, good. And together is what we call the thyroid hormones. So when we say thyroid hormones, we are talking about T3 and the T4. The triiodothyronine is the T3. Then the tyrosine is the T. Okay, they are the hormones produced the hormones produced the thyroid gland. Okay, it looks like the is very bad. All right, that is fine. Let's wait. Okay, all right. Me now. Hello, can you hear?
Yeah, we can't hear you. The line is just breaking.
All right, that is fine. Let's hope. I think it's the network. But let's hope it gets better. Okay, so this is how the thyroid gland looks like. So you see here, this is the trachea. So you see, I was telling you it's located below the trachea. So you see, it's located below the larynx. So you see, there's the larynx. The larynx, that's the voice box, is over here. Then the trachea is here. Okay, so the thyroid gland is located below the larynx, but anterior to the trachea. So you see, this is the trachea. Here is the trachea. Okay, here is the trachea. And then the larynx is at the top. So that's why we say the thyroid gland is located below the larynx, but in front of the trachea. So you see, this is the trachea and the thyroid gland is in front. That's anterior to the trachea. Okay, great. And you see, it looks like a butterfly. Is that okay? It looks like a butterfly. Okay, good. So over here, this is showing the cells. So you see, we can see the follicular cells. The follicular cells, they produce the T3 and then the T4. Okay, and then the parafollicular cells. These are the parafollicular cells. These ones, the red and white. Okay, the red and white. They are the parafollicular cells. They produce the calcitonin. Is that okay? So the red and white, they are the follicular cells. They produce the calcitonin. Okay, good. And then this one's the follicular cells, the parafollicular cells, they produce the calcitonin. That's the red and white. And then the follicular cells, these are the follicular cells. They produce the T3 and T4. Okay, so here is it. So here is the parafollicular cells. Here, the red and white ones. And then these are the follicular cells. So these ones are the ones that produce the triiodotyrosine, which is the T3, and then the T4, which is the tyrosine. Okay, good. So this is how it looks like. So you see here, we have the parafollicular cells inside. Okay, that's the C cells. You see, it's labeled over here, C cells. You see, C cells. The C cells are the same as the parafollicular cells. The C cells. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's fine. So if I ask you, which cell in the thyroid gland produces calcitonin, what will be your answer?
Parafollicular cell.
The parafollicular cells or
The C cell.
the C cell. Okay. Which cell in the thyroid gland produces the thyroid hormones T3 and T4?
The follicular cell or the
The follicular cell or
the epithelial cell.
epithelial cell. What is the name given to the narrowed portion of the thyroid gland? The narrowed medial portion of the thyroid gland.
Follicle.
What's the name given to the narrowed middle portion or medial portion of the thyroid gland? We discussed this in class last week. What's the name given to the narrow middle portion of the thyroid gland?
The isthmus.
The isthmus. So a question like this there, when it comes, is bonus. The isthmus. The narrowed medial portion that is joining the two lobes of the thyroid gland. That's the isthmus. Is that okay? That's the isthmus. Okay, so if we ask you what's the name given to the narrowed medial portion of the thyroid gland, that's the isthmus. Okay, over here. So here, this portion here, this portion is what we call the isthmus. This portion, the isthmus. Okay, this portion is what we call the isthmus. Okay, all right, that's fine. What's the name given to? Okay, what's the location? Where is the thyroid gland? Okay, I can ask you a question like, what's the location of the thyroid gland in relation to the larynx? What will be your answer? What's the location of the thyroid gland in relation to the larynx? What will be your answer?
The superior
Below the larynx.
Come again?
It's located below the larynx.
It's
below the
larynx.
larynx.
Yeah.
It shows that you people are good anatomists. So I can ask you a question like, what's the relation of the thyroid gland? Sorry, what's the location of the thyroid gland in relation to the larynx? Then A, I'll write below the larynx. C5 and T1. Then D, anterior to the trachea. You see, someone will think that A, then the thing is anterior to the trachea. But you see, the question is specific that what's the location of the thyroid gland in relation to the larynx? So it means we want you to tell us a location relative to the larynx. We don't want you to come and tell us C5 and T1. No. We don't want you to come and say anterior to the trachea because we want in relation to the larynx. So it means you have to go in for the answer which is below the larynx. Is that okay? All right. That's fine. Okay. Now let's we can also look at the functions of, the thyroid hormones are two, the T3 and T4. Now, the thyroid hormones, the T3 and T4, they are responsible for metabolic activities. So, your metabolic rate, your oxygen consumption level, your temperature regulation, your cardiovascular function, respiratory activity, okay, all that is controlled by T3 and T4. So, if we ask you the function of the thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, is for metabolic activity, metabolism. So, what's the work of T3 and T4? It's for metabolism. Okay, so the T3 and T4 is what controls your metabolism, like your breathing rate, your cardiovascular function, that's your heart. So what that means is that if T3 and T4 level goes high, your blood pressure can go high, your respiratory rate can go high, your metabolic rate can go high, your temperature will go high. That's the reason why if a patient is having high levels of T3 and T4, they can't cope in an area where temperature is high. So in science, we say they have heat intolerance. That simply means they can't tolerate heat. Is that okay? The reason is because this hormone, T3, T4, that is what is responsible for metabolic activity. They increase metabolism. So your respiratory will go high, your cardiovascular functions will increase, okay? Your metabolic rate will go high, your body temperature will go high. So if such a person, you take the person to an area where temperature is high, they can't cope over there. Is that okay? So that also means that if T3 and T4 level goes low, metabolism will also go low, meaning your heart function will go low, your breathing rate will be low, metabolism will be low, oxygen consumption will be low, body temperature will be low. So if you take such a person to an area where temperature is very low, day to day can't cope. So in medicine, we say they have cold intolerance. Cold intolerance. Okay, because the T3 and T4, that is what is responsible for what? Metabolic activities. How about the calcitonin? The calcitonin, what they do is it lowers blood calcium levels. But remember, in examining you on anatomy, I'm not going to ask you questions on the functions of the hormones. But at least because we are talking about it, you have to know. Okay, so the calcitonin, what does it do? They are responsible for lowering your blood calcium levels. They lower your blood calcium levels. Is that okay? So in a situation where your blood calcium levels is becoming high, then calcitonin will be produced by the parafollicular cells or the C cells. Then they lower your blood calcium levels. Is that okay? Great. And I think, did I explain how thyroid hormone is being synthesized from the thyroid gland? I think I explained, right? I explained that in class. Yes, I remember I explained that in class. So let's skip that one for now. Okay, then did we do the parathyroid gland? Did we do the parathyroid gland?
No.
Okay, so the parathyroid gland. So this gland is also known as, this gland, we also call it epithelial bodies. Epithelial bodies. Say epithelial bodies.
Epithelial body.
Epithelial bodies.
Epithelial bodies.
Good. Remember, we didn't say epithelial gland though. Please remember. And remember, we didn't say epithelial cells. We said this gland is also called epithelial bodies. Because there is another gland that has cells we call epithelial cells, which is in the thyroid gland. You know, the follicular cells are also called epithelial cells. So if you are not careful, this will confuse you. Parathyroid gland, we also call them epithelial bodies. In fact, these glands are small glands in the neck region that regulate your blood calcium levels. Okay, so parathyroid gland, what they do is that they regulate your blood calcium levels. They regulate it. Is that okay? They regulate your blood calcium levels. Okay. Now, typically, you know, this gland, typically, there are 4 tiny glands. Is that okay? This is how they look like. So you see, there's the parathyroid gland. In fact, these glands are actually at the back of the back. So you see, this is how the thyroid gland look like. You see, this is how the thyroid gland, this is how it look like. Okay, so you see how the thyroid gland look like. There's the front view of the thyroid gland. Now, behind the thyroid gland, that's where the parathyroid glands are. Parathyroid gland, behind. So they are located behind the thyroid gland. Is that so? You see at the back. So this is the front view of the thyroid gland. You don't see the para there, but at the back of the thyroid gland here, that is where we have the parathyroid glands. Is that okay? That's where we have the parathyroid glands. So they are located behind the parathyroid gland. Now we have 2 different types of cells in the parathyroid gland. We have the chief cells, and then we have the oxyphil cells. Say chief cells. Say it after me. Say chief cells.
Chief cells.
Chief cells. And then say oxyphil cells. Oxyphil cells. Oxyphil.
Oxyphil.
Oxyphil cells.
Ossicle cells.
Great. So we have two different types of cells in the parathyroid gland. We have the chief cells, and then we have the ossicle cells. Okay, the chief cells, and we have the ossicle cells. Now, is the chief cells, the reason why we call it chief is that chief is the boss. So it's the chief cells that actually produces the parathyroid hormone, which does the main work of the thyroid gland. Okay, so that's why we call it the chief cell, meaning the boss cell. Okay, the chief cell, they produce or secrete the parathyroid hormones. And then the ossicle cell, the function is not really clear in anatomy, but what we believe in is that the ossicle cell, they support the chief cell to work. Is that okay? So the parathyroid gland has two cells. The chief cell, they actually produce what? The parathyroid hormone. But the ossicle, they support the chief cell to produce the parathyroid hormone. You see how it goes. So the chief cell, they actually produce the parathyroid hormone. The ossicle cell, on the other hand, they also support the chief cell to produce the parathyroid hormones. Is that okay? Great. So when we ask you, okay, how many cells do we have in the parathyroid gland? They are two. What are they? The chief cells and then the ossicle cells. Okay, what is the function of the chief cells? They secrete the parathyroid hormones. Okay, how about the ossicle cells? They help the chief cells to produce the parathyroid hormones. They are like helpers, the ossicle cells. Is that okay? They help the chief cells to produce the parathyroid hormones. Is that okay? Good. Now, the next thing you have to know is that what's the function of the parathyroid? What's the function of the parathyroid hormones? What do they do? You remember we spoke about the calcitonin. If you remember, the thyroid gland produces calcitonin. What does the calcitonin do? It lowers your blood calcium level. Now, this parathyroid hormone, they actually increase your blood calcium level. So you see, the parathyroid gland, the main function of the parathyroid gland is that it produces the parathyroid hormone. The main function of the parathyroid gland is that it produces the parathyroid hormone. But then we have two cells in the parathyroid gland, the chief cell and then the ossicle cell. The chief cell is the one that actually produces the parathyroid hormone. But we have another cell we call the ossicle. They help the chief cells to produce the parathyroid hormone. What is the work of the parathyroid hormone? It increases your blood calcium level. Is that okay? It helps to increase your blood calcium level. Okay, so keep it in your mind. What is the work of parathyroid hormone? It helps to increase your blood calcium level. Okay, what is the work of calcitonin? Calcitonin, what does it do?
Lowest blood
It
calcium.
Lowers
lowers
your blood
The
calcium
blood.
level. Okay. Parathyroid hormone, what does it do?
increases blood
It
calcium.
increases your blood calcium level. It increases your blood calcium level. Is that okay? But there is something unique about this gland. As it is increasing your blood calcium level, it lowers your blood phosphate levels too. Okay, so it increases your blood calcium level. It also helps to lower your blood phosphate levels. It increases your blood calcium levels. It also helps to lower your blood phosphate levels. Okay, so remember, the parathyroid gland, what does it do? It increases your blood calcium level. At the same time, it helps to lower your blood phosphate levels. It increases your blood calcium level. It also helps to lower your blood phosphate levels. Is that okay? Okay, now how many cells do we have in the parathyroid gland?
2 cells.
Two cells. Excellent. What are the cells, please?
The
The
chief
chief
cell.
cells and the ossicle cells.
And the ossicle cell. What is the work of the ossicle cells?
They support the
It
cell
helps.
to produce.
Parathyroid hormone. Yes, so they support the chief cells to produce the parathyroid hormone. Okay, what is the work of the chief cells?
They produce the parathyroid hormone.
They produce the parathyroid hormones. That is excellent. What is another name for the parathyroid gland?
Epithelial bone.
Thyroid hormone.
Good, excellent. Yes, excellent. Okay, now we will end with this gland for this online meeting. We will end with the adrenal gland. We will end with the adrenal gland for this online meeting for today.